Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is Hawkcast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I am your lead analyst and host, Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined as always by managing editor Ross Binder and our publisher Adam Jacoby. Before we get started, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, whether you're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, because wherever you're listening, we don't want you to miss an episode. So hit that subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, drop a like, drop a comment, let us know what you're thinking about all things Hawkeyes. And of course, we're going to start off by getting into big time commitments over the last few days for the Iowa football program. Literally big. Three offensive linemen commit in a span of 2 days, announced their commitments publicly in a span of 2 days. Of course, our premium subscribers knew that was coming before that, quite a bit before that, relative to when those announcements came out. But three-star Owen Linder commits from Chanhassen, Minnesota. Three-star guard from Colin Whitters, or excuse me, from Iowa City West, Colin Whitters commits. And then, of course, four-star from Brandon, South Dakota, Hudson Parliament, who will also be a guard. He commits as well. So huge weekend, huge couple days for the Iowa football program and the 2026 class. Getting a four-star, it never hurts. A guy like Hudson, and then of course a local kid in Colin Whitters and Owen Linder, who had a few SEC offers and programs showing interest. So, Ross, I'll go to you here first. What were your initial reactions? I know I shared that with you guys before all the news came out, and I personally, and I quote, said, "Holy shit, three within this short span of time." Of course, fresh off this junior day. So, Ross, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little surprising and kind of exciting to, obviously to get a bunch of guys bam like that. It was the junior. I did expect some commits out of the junior day event. That's pretty typical. Iowa brings a lot of guys in for that, and a lot of guys that know about Iowa, that Iowa knows about. It's kind of that last step before kind of pulling the trigger for a lot of guys. They want to get that visit and just kind of lock things down. So I figured there'd be some, commits coming out of that event. Didn't expect necessarily three, nor that all three would be at the offensive line. That made a little more sense to me after, your reporting and your articles. One of the things that was a consistent theme in those was, George Barnett uh, talked to them at the junior day, and in addition to the fact that they love Barnett, like that comes through so clearly in every time you guys talk to the OL commits and the prospects, and then once they're on campus and they're players, they're preaching the gospel of Barnett. And one of the things that they all mentioned though this weekend was that he's a straight shooter, and one of the things he said was that these are the spots we got, and when they're gone, basically, right? So, and it wasn't in a way that was like meant to pressure them, I think, into like, oh, you better commit right now. But I think it was just they appreciate that candor that he has, and it kind of helped crystallize for them, hey, I like Iowa. Let's just make this happen. So that's kind of was my big takeaway from those three guys committing this weekend.
Adam, how about you?
Yeah, I'll echo what we're three, two. I'll echo what Ross was saying about how this is such a reflection of the relationships that George Barnett is able to create with these recruits. And, he's not an offensive line coach for everybody, obviously, just, sort of the same way that Kirk Ferentz isn't a head coach for everybody. But to the type that it takes to play for a George Barnett, for a Kirk Ferentz, you see that, more and more recruits, especially these high-level recruits like, Hudson Parliament, that message really starts to resonate. And you also start to see sort of the fruits of Barnett's coaching as well. It's one thing to create the relationship with recruits and to sort of sell them on a future. It's another thing when you can actually point to the progress that's made by a Connor Colby, by a Jennings Dunker, basically all of the upperclassmen that we saw on the offensive line. He can point to, you know, not only just like green shoots of success, but an actual progression into all Big Ten caliber play from guys who, when their career started, really didn't belong on the field. And so that sort of proof of concept is also extremely helpful, especially once we're starting to get into, trying to get the commitments from recruits that are also getting offers and attention from SEC schools, from your Kansas State, the other local or Midwest powerhouses, if you will, the rivals that Iowa often finds themselves up against. So yeah, really, uh, it really entrenches the fact that there's a lot of ice cold seats among the assistant coaching pool in Iowa City. And you really have to look at Barnett's as cold as anybody's, up to and including the likes of Phil Parker and LeVar Woods at this point. Would you agree with that assessment, Eliot?
I would say that's probably not necessarily the public perception. I think the
Right.
public perception has really that's something that I included in my three thoughts was stop the Barnett slander. That was literally the title of one of the sections.
Yeah.
Because we've seen its progression now, and we've seen it under a competent offensive coordinator. And we've seen it from Mason Richmond, who was hurt last year, look exponentially better. Jennings Dunker now being one of the best tackles in the Big Ten. Like, who saw that coming necessarily? And Logan Jones coming back is for next season is huge. Bo Stevens looking like a formidable left guard when just a few years ago he was not. So I think a lot of that goes to credit goes to George Barnett, but also Kirk Ferentz, but also Raymond Braithwaite, right? Like you gotta, there a lot goes into that offensive line group. Um, and so I would say in terms of the public perception, it's begun to cool off. Internally, I don't know that Barnett's seat was hot at really any point. I think it would have had to take a couple more years for Kirk to be like, oh crap, But who knows how much longer Kirk's going to be around? That's not me reporting anything, just a fact of how much more seasoned he's getting as the years go along. But
I think that we can report that it's going to be fewer than 20 years.
Yeah, right. Yes, we can report
Yeah.
that. I will go on the record and say that. But what I will say about Barnett in this arena, I guess, is I will reiterate what you said, Ross, and what we shared is that he's beloved by these recruits. Like all four of them referenced him as, if not the number one reason for committing to Iowa, one of their top reasons for committing to Iowa. Allowed just 17 sacks in 2024 to 32 from last year. Went from 159, or excuse me, 115.9 rushing yards per game to over 197. 11 touchdowns on the ground last year to 30 this year. You can point to a variety of different things, right? You can point to moving on from Deacon Hill. You can point to the fact that Caleb Johnson was freaking unreal this year. You can point to the new offense from Tim Lester. But that type of production just fundamentally does not happen without a better offensive line, and that offensive line doesn't improve without George Barnett. So, all of these
Yeah.
things credit him for the work that he's done with this group and for sticking around when things were real bad in those first few years.
Yeah, I was gonna say one other thing about, Barnett and the success of the offensive line. I don't recall a lot of attrition among that unit over the last few years in terms of guys, leaving for the portal or, other things. Like it's a group that's really stuck together. And I think you see why when you talk to them and, they go back to Barnett. Like he's a guy that has their backs, not just when they're recruits, he has their backs when they're players too. And and that support goes both ways. And that's a really, really bought in offensive line group. to Barnett and what he's doing. And I think last year, like Eliot said, the outside fan, and you could really start to see that in the production on the field. Like the first few years, it's a lot of words from the players, from the commits, from Barnett, from Ferentz, but that on-field production just wasn't there. And obviously, that's what fans are going to focus on. It's like, this quarterback keeps getting sacked, or there's no holes for this running back. Like, what the hell's the offensive line doing? What's this coach doing? He sucks. And now we're starting to see, last year, we really got to see, okay, here he is with an offensive line that he's molded for a couple years, developed, and now they're actually, they're breaking through. Like Eliot said, a lot of other factors that contributed to, better quarterback play, much better play calling from Tim Lester, play design from Tim Lester and Caleb Johnson, of course. But it does all start with the big guys up front, and they were much better last year. And George Barnett was a big part of that.
What I hope for out of this is that the average fan, maybe not out of these commits, right? But like going into the next season as the offensive line continues to improve, is the average fan or the casual fan doesn't go immediately to, well, the offensive line doesn't block anybody. Okay, well, chances are you don't know what the hell you're talking about, you know. And so it was just routinely that in a lot of the comments. And if there is a position group that people just fundamentally don't know a lot about, it's offensive line.
Yeah, it can be a little bit of a sphinx of a position group. One, because you're sort of having to watch five players in tandem and none of them, have the ball essentially, or should not be touching the ball after the snap. If they are, something has probably gone very wrong. So, it's certainly the least sexy of the position groups, but I always argue that it's one of the most important, if not the most important. And that I think in terms of where Barnett's stock is going to be among the fan base, I think this year is going to be, 2025 is going to be fascinating in terms of, where this unit comes in because one, we're starting to get, almost exclusively Barnett recruits at this point, if not entirely Barnett recruits. I think Logan Jones would be the exception at this point. Um, but this is starting to get into like uh, Trevor Lauk, Cade Pieper, and then you start to look at guys like the four-star like Cody Fox. You look at Jano, who we've heard has been coming on really, really strong, and he was one of the more lightly recruited members of that recruiting class of 2024, just like Pieper was, a two-star 5.3 for us in 2023. So you start to see that there is that building of these prospects, year over year, even if they're not getting on the field. And so where this offensive line shakes out, and especially how much better it should be than where this previous version was when those guys really did not belong on the field. Like the extent to which this new offensive line belongs on the field, for lack of a better bar to clear, is really going to say a lot about how well Barnett has been doing his job in preparing the team for this exodus, I would say.
So we didn't actually intend to make this conversation about Barnett. We were going to talk about the three commits. So let's revert back to that. One
Yeah,
thing
fair, fair.
that I just want to break down between all three of them quick, and what I assess that they can bring. Linder's a big right tackle. We had him listed as a guard. He's probably going to play tackle. I think a lot of programs were looking at him as a guard. It's just the way that Iowa's offensive line tends to operate. Is some of these guys that look like guards coming out of high school end up being tackles, i.e. Jennings Dunker. Mason Richmond will tell you himself he probably projects to guard at the next level. Might have played left guard this year had Caden Proctor stayed there at left tackle, stayed in Iowa City. So he's a guy, Linder, been playing right tackle at his high school level. Would assume he's going to fall into the fold there. Then you look at Whitters, a guy who just started playing guard within the last year and then picked up offers this summer before actually taking any game reps at guard. Iowa State, Kansas State, Iowa. So it wouldn't have surprised me if he went back onto the camp circuit this year at some of those bigger camps and then picked up a bunch of more offers. But he's a Hawkeye through and through. Like I said, grew up in Iowa City, very involved in the community. And then I honestly think, like I said, he could have blown up. He's a good athlete, and I think he'll be a really good guard at this coming level. And then Hudson Parliament, 4-star for a reason. Somebody that I know in the South Dakota area said the best prospect out of South Dakota in a long time. Um, he's not a talker, he's a doer. That's for sure of Hudson. Got a lot of offers, got interest from Alabama. Oregon stopped at his school this last week, or not this last week, but this last month. So bigger schools were starting to circle, but he said, from his junior day last year before he got the offer, that this is where he wanted to be. And to get a guy like that is really big. Really, he's just one of those guys that you look at and you watch his film and goes, oh, that he's mean. Not all offensive linemen are like that. Not all offensive linemen have that. And he's a guy that's mean on the football field. Adam, I know you were planning on writing a premium article for us about evaluation of these guys. Have you gotten a second to look at their film or anything stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the big things that stands out to me about these three guys and to the same extent with Carson Nielsen is the
We haven't mentioned
athleticism.
one time to start. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first commit in the 26th class, all that, 6'7", 280, big dude. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. The largest of said recruits, but even when we're talking about the guys who are only 6'4", 300 with Colin Whitters, that is you expect somebody, especially in high school, 6'4", 300 is dominant size, right? And you put somebody like that on the outside, you understand why he didn't have those reps at guard, but at the next level, he looks like somebody who's got the footwork for basically all five of the different offensive line positions. Parliament, like you said, that nasty streak, that mean streak, and on top of that, we're talking about plus level size. We're talking about, he is not somebody that is going to need 3 years to work his way into the rotation. He already looks strong enough to play Big Ten offensive line. And then Linder on top of that, again, more versatility, as you've mentioned before. Um, and somebody who it wouldn't surprise me if, he ends up at guard or tackle. Ross, you and I are old enough to remember, in the earlier days of the Kirk Ferentz era, everybody played guard, right? Like all of
Yeah.
the best prospects at some point were going to spend at least half a season at guard. And one, because it was sort of an easier way to get on the field. Two, because if you've got the footwork for guard and for tackle, or if you've got the footwork for tackle, you've probably got it for guard as well. But it and then it was just a matter of get your five best blockers on the field. It won't surprise me if at least three of these four guys that are in this class are on the field at any given time for the Hawkeyes because you see so many different ways that they can operate together. You see so many different ways that you can piece, this guy here, that guy there. And with the buffer, if you will, of only Lucas Allgaier in the class prior to this one, there isn't going to be as much of a, sort of logjam of upperclassmen waiting for their time to get into the rotation. So, yeah, this is, sort of exactly what you would want this offensive line class to look like, especially in the context of the prior offensive line class and the one prior to that, too. So, yeah, that is, you see so many different avenues for success. Eliot, would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. Throw in Joey Van Wetsinga in the class prior to
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
I Parliament told me that he's been taking some reps at center as well, but I feel like Van Wetsinga is probably going to be there. Probably going to be a staple
Because
at center spot.
Parliament projects inside. Is that the thought
Yep.
right now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so generally speaking, the way that recruits have told me about how they project on the offensive line is any of those inside guys could play guard, center, guard. And any of the outside guys could play left tackle, right tackle, more or less, and it's a case by case thing. But Whitters is probably not going to play center, is as he told me himself. And it'll be probably Van Wetzinga or Parliament, depending on how things go. But Parliament's a guy that you look at and you say there's NFL possibilities there. And honestly, I think the same way about Whitters too. I think he's a very underrated athlete, and he's only getting bigger. I mean, he played tight end before he played guard. I don't know if you guys knew that or if you read that in any of my stuff, but he was also a defensive lineman before that, and a pretty good one as a sophomore before he played as a junior. So played guard as a junior, and he still plays in some specific packages at defensive tackle as well. And so he's got that explosion, that athleticism. Basketball really helps with the feet and the footwork that you mentioned, Adam. So I definitely see some
That's
possibility there.
that's all stuff we know Iowa really values in prospects too. That multi-sport ability and that versatility to play a lot of different positions, a lot of experience at different positions. That's all really invaluable once you get to the college Big Ten level, and you're eventually going to get slotted into one spot. But when you've got all those other skills too, it can really make a difference.
Yeah, and everything that you're mentioning about this skill set, it's basically the same archetype as Marshall Yanda, right? And Iowa knows how to use somebody that has that level of explosion, that level of, mean streak, that level of and Yanda was not the biggest of dudes either. 6'4", 300 sounds about right for him, especially coming out of JUCO when Iowa got him. So, you don't have to be 6'8", 350 to be mean enough to, take somebody out of the game and, have them leave on a stretcher or, this or that. But yeah, you can see why Iowa values Whitters so highly. Anyway, sorry, Eliot, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was going to say, so that's okay.
Oh, fantastic.
So it is basketball season, so we will move on here to men's hoops momentarily. Before we do that, I talked to a few people behind the scenes, got some notes on Mark Gronowski and his initial impressions here in Iowa City, what people are thinking. Those who have talked to him, of course, he's got the surgery, and of course, spring ball's not happening right now, so nobody's seen him throw or anything like that. But we're just talking about what he's been like in the building and stuff like that. That's for our premium subscribers. You can check that out, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. We'd love to have you. You can join us in the conversations on the premium board too. And you'll be privy to some information about an upcoming special guest here on the podcast, which we'll tell you a little bit more about towards the end. But men's basketball, I believe it was 4 out of 5 now that they've lost in the Big Ten after a 3-2 start. So yes, 4 out of 5. All right? Yeah, there we go. And they've looked pretty awful at moments in time during the stretch, if not a decent contingent of the time during this stretch. Winless on the road in the Big Ten, absolutely throttled at the hands of UCLA and Wisconsin. Got they got the crap kicked out of them at Ohio State too. There's that loss to USC that was made better at the end. It looked a lot worse during a good contingent of the game than the final score indicated. Still allowed 99 points on the road. These teams, there's this moniker that I heard when I was covering the New Orleans Pelicans that a radio host would say, "Play the Pelicans, break a record." When you play the Hawkeyes, you shoot over 60%. And that's more of a mouthful, but that's where things are at with this Hawkeye team. I don't understand the pick and roll coverage. The hedging out front leaves Owen in a disadvantageous position to get back to recover, whether it's that to protect the rim with essentially 4 guards on the court at most times, at least in the starting lineup, because Peyton Sandfort, though he's 6'7", not really, a rim protector of a forward. Additionally, um, the likelihood that he will get into foul trouble by way of being out on the perimeter rather than being close to the bucket is not advantageous. So I don't understand the pick and roll coverages. I don't understand the starting lineup for that matter, personnel wise, especially given the pick and roll coverages that Fran likes to use rather than drop coverage, rather than switching, which I just don't get it. I also don't get how the offensive output has really fallen off a cliff. I mean, because it's been bad, and it's been bad from start to finish in these last few games. And you know, the you said it in our thread the other day, Ross. The second half Sanford thing is cute, but if you start the first half and you haven't scored a single bucket, Josh Dix comes out, goes 0 of 7, doesn't score a point against Ohio State. I don't know how this thing can go forward, onward and upward. We'll say that. I don't know how the trajectory can be changed at this point. It's bad. It's not fun to watch. True Thelwell in what's been a bright spot goes 8 of 10 the other night, leads the team in scoring, 20 points, and they still lose by 20. Like where's NBA caliber shooter Peyton Sandford? Where's the consistency right now from Josh Dix, who was arguably their most consistent player? Where's Owen Freeman in the second half against Ohio State? Brock Harding finishes with a minus 24 plus minus against Ohio State in I think 18 minutes, maybe 20 some minutes. I might have that backwards. 24 minutes minus 18, something like that. I don't have the box
It's
score in front of me.
it's real bad, no matter which way the numbers go
Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's not a good interpretation there.
0 points. So not necessarily a threat to score. He's become a better shooter, especially at the 3-point line, but not necessarily a threat to score. And you're a minus defensively because of his size. There's just so, and there's a complete lack of willingness by Fran to change the starting lineup right now. And I mentioned the personnel. We talked about that from the jump. I had a lineup that I thought would make the most sense. Fran hasn't gone to it once. I don't even know if he's gone to it in the middle of a game. It's frustrating as a media member, let alone as a fan. Like I can't. The fans are fed up right now. I mean, talking to other media folks, our numbers on media or on men's basketball stuff isn't great because people don't want to read it because they're not good. Like it's just
It's the opposite of a virtuous cycle. It's a unvirtuous cycle or
it's
something. I don't know. I mean,
negative feedback loop.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Misery loves company, but McCaffluenza is a lonely affair.
I don't know where to go with that.
Did I miss anything? Like, I'm sorry,
No,
I got off my soapbox and was like, here you go, guys.
yeah.
Go ahead, Ross.
No, I was just, I guess speaking about the Ohio State game, since that's the most recent, debacle to discuss, one of the things I think you brought up, during the game was, Owen and Drew had really good first halves. I think they had all but like four of Iowa's points in the first half. So it's like that's great for them, but that's not sustainable. And sure enough, in the second half, it was not sustainable. Like Freeman's production dropped off a cliff, and Thelwell's slowed down a little bit, and then just nobody else stepped up. It was, Dix had the night from hell shooting the ball. Um, there just is not there's not a plan B with this team. When whatever the plan A is doesn't work, there's a real tough time turning things around when things go sideways. I think we've seen that pretty consistently.
The yeah, I think you nailed it right there, Ross. Is if plan A doesn't work, not only does it not work, there's no plan B apparently. And three, we start seeing dudes hanging heads. Like body language is not good right now with this team. It's Fran mentioned the other night after the game on the radio, which is typically what I listen to for quotes for our post game three takeaways when they're on the road if Fran isn't made available. He said they need leadership in those moments, which was a surprise to me for a variety of reasons. Um, Peyton Sandford's supposed to be that guy. Drew Thelwell's supposed to be that guy. We've heard about Brock Harding's leadership. What's going on? Um, it's just it's odd. It's not only frustrating, it's not only disappointing in a year where the ceiling was exponentially higher than what they've played right now. That's something that we mentioned going into the year was this is a great pickup for Sadu, but it's all about if Peyton can come back. And Peyton has struggled. There's been these incredible second half performances at times, but it hasn't been consistent. And Peyton is the straw that stirs the drink for this team. He is the season. The success of this team starts and ends with Peyton Sandfort. And he's had that wrist thing. He had the shoulder deal. It's very admirable of him to have fought through those things. I think it would have been beneficial for him to sit out a little bit, especially in the non-con when they were playing USC upstate. So it's unfortunate to see it go the way it has too, because I don't know anybody that doesn't like Peyton on a personal level. Like he and Price are really good people. Stanford parents did an awesome job. It's just unfortunate to see things not fall the way that they could have, because I think all three of us would agree that this team had some real potential going into this season. I also am uh, I think we're still waiting to see the fruits of the labor for Ladji Dembele as well. He's been kind of relegated to the bench in these last few games. 5 minutes minus 10 against Ohio State, which again, not great. If you're in a situation where Owen has to go to the bench, if Riley Mulvey is your next best option, not ideal. Just to be like, and he's been better. He's been more consistent. He's getting boards. His per 40 has gotten astronomically better on the boards and in terms of his scoring. So he's improving, but you need Logi to show some of those things that we saw at the beginning of his freshman year. He's strong and athletic, and you're not seeing those things come to fruition like you'd want them to right now. And you're not getting anything from Chris Tajo as a freshman right now, just because he's not playing as much. He's still figuring it out. And I'm not trying to put any blame on Chris Tajo or anything like that, but that was a hope going into the season as well, that you'd see a little bit more from a guy like Chris Tajo. Cooper Koch not playing right now because of medical issue. Just anything and everything almost could have gone wrong. I mean, the way that everything goes wrong is you lose to Northwestern, right? Or you drop a few of these other games. I mean, you were right there with Iowa State, who's a top 5 team in the country, but then you go on the road and lose by a lot to UCLA, who had just gotten back from Rutgers across the freaking country and was one of the worst scoring teams in Big Ten play. Stuff just doesn't add up. It's just not making a lot of sense.
Yeah, it really does seem like a lot of these rotations aren't playing into these guys' strengths. I mean, how often do we see, for example, lineups where Seydou Traore's in the game, but he isn't paired with Thelwell, so you don't have that really dynamic combo in press situations. Yeah, things have really not come to fruition at the four for all the, myriad reasons that you mentioned. But I think one of the key problems at the four, in really an area where you see the defense sort of break down, is that you don't see Dembele be that rim protector or that guy who provides that weak side help too. I mean, yeah, you can be big, strong, and he is as physically imposing as anybody that Iowa, sort of puts on the court. He's, you know, he could, probably match up, excuse me, pound for pound with Owen Freeman, right? Like, but you don't see it manifest itself at the rim. You don't see it turn into, well, he's keeping guys away from the glass. And so when you have those physical gifts and you're not using them, and then, in those instances where Sanford's shot isn't falling, you're really almost on a 5 against 4 situation, or a 4 against 5 if you're, from Iowa's perspective, because you're not getting what makes Sanford great, which is that elite jump shooting. He contributes very, very well in these other areas, but he shoots with such a volume that if it's not going down, the offense just necessarily grinds to a halt, because those are so many empty possessions, and he's such a talented rebounder that if he's not in that position to help with those offensive rebounds, then that possession is essentially over as soon as the ball leaves his hands one way or the other. And the same thing goes with Freeman, which is why I'm happy that he's not been shooting more three-pointers this season. But, by and large, you see that this team is not really set up to have, or is not often having five productive guys on the court at once. And yeah, the rotations don't help that. The lack of confidence as soon as plan A, goes wrong doesn't help that. But, this was a team that was supposed to be a big three, right? Like this is a team that was supposed to not have to worry about plan A not going to plan. So, yeah, it does absolutely seem like a crisis of leadership somewhere on this roster in some way, shape, or form. And often at some point as a coach, you just say, all right, somebody better step up and solve this for, yourselves. You can't force leadership on, the situation and sort of decide who the leader is going to be. But as a roster, as a team, as a group of guys who have their pride involved, someone's got to have to step up on this roster and pretty much ASAP because for for all their efforts, they are still in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. Barely, but they are still like they could still do it. They could still do it, but they've got to figure it out quick.
Adam, I saw you look at your watch. Uh, Now they're not part of the March Madness conversation. Sorry.
They could play their way back into it by,
Yeah.
winning six of their next seven is what I'm trying to say.
I
They don't belong in any
no.
right now. No. Yeah. Okay.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It's just not Ross, you have something to say here because go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was just gonna, to the point about leadership, I think it really becomes apparent, how often, and I say that rhetorically because I think we all know this happens multiple times a game, it seems like, when they get a bad stretch that just turns into like an avalanche for the other team, Like that's how Iowa ends up losing these games, especially on the road by,
Routinely.
yeah,
Routinely.
by
It's
50.
a trend. What did I say after the UCLA game? It's officially a trend. Sorry, Russ.
Yeah, no, you're right. 100% right. When you lose by 15, 20, 25 points, that happens because you have those stretches where, they get outscored 20-2 or something, or it's, a 12-2 stretch here and then a 13-4 stretch there and a 14-5 stretch in the second half. Like there's these periods where things just go completely sideways and there's no ability to get it back. The on-court ability to just, okay, we gotta just, put us, get a stand, get a stop, slow this down and try and turn things around. That's not there. And, Fran doesn't call timeouts in those situations. That's been,
Oh, it's
I
coaching
mean,
malpractice.
yeah, that's something that's driven people crazy for 15 years though. Like that has been his MO since he got here pretty much is he's a let players play through it kind of coach in those situations. I mean, it's a disastrous move this year because there's no playing through it. It's you let them play through it, and now a 6 point run turns into a 16 point run in like 2 minutes. You're 90 seconds practically. It's like this is just it's a a spark turning into a wildfire basically. Um, just things get so bad so fast, and it happens like you said, Eliot, every game, especially on the road. It really happens every game.
And what it reminds me of at times, something I thought the other night is there's a situation where it's starting to go sideways and Peyton gets a rebound, chucks up a shot right away. What that reminds me of, frankly, is JV basketball. Oh, I gotta get it all back at once. Well, you can't. If there's 12 minutes left on the clock and you're down by 15, run your offense. And there's too much ball watching on top of that. I don't know how many times I say this multiple times a game. Too much ball watching, too much dribbling. And It's things that either can result in a hero ball, which it hasn't, or it makes everything worse. And again,
Yeah,
this is routine.
A lot of immature decision making. Like the players themselves are not, I wouldn't call them immature, but the decisions, like that quick shot thing, like it's just like you said, that's a JV move. It's like, oh, I'm gonna, do this right now and try and get it back. It's like, hey, now come on, you gotta slow down, take it easy, just play the offense, run the
Es-
offense.
Especially against Ohio State, who wasn't doubling in the post when Owen Freeman has just feed the guy, feed him. What are you doing? Why wouldn't you? Like, that should be at the top of the scouting report 90% of the time. He's a damn good big man. Give him the ball, let him score. And I
Well,
mean,
and if
it,
Iowa can actually make shots on offense, that actually gives them a chance to try and get into, a defense on the other end and hopefully slow the other team down. When they take these quick shots and, the other team gets the rebound, they're just off to the races. And yeah.
yeah, and what it really just ends up looking like is not having trust in the offense. And so then you take that quick shot. You try to, make that 10-point shot. And again, you go back to, the timing of the offense and getting these guys in position to succeed. When you take that shot as soon as you're within 5 feet of the 3-point line, and Freeman's still, trailing you 15 feet behind you, then all of a sudden he's not in position to get that or even contend for the offensive rebound. And then, yeah, if the shot doesn't go in, it is an automatic, like, empty possession. And that doesn't help this offense. And in situations where, as the old adage goes, if you want to start a run, get multiple stops. If you want to stop a run, get multiple stops. When you are just handing your opponent stops in situations where you are prone to giving up runs, that's again a situation where you're just sort of pouring gas on the fire. So, yeah, you want to see Iowa play some smarter ball. You want to see the coaches, get them playing smarter ball. But at the end of the day, it's up to the players to make those smarter decisions too. So, yeah, not really easy to see what this fix is.
and as a team, 68% from the free throw line. As good of a shooter as Price Sanford is from three, he's shooting like 70% from the free throw line. That should be 80, 85%. Owen Freeman, who gets fouled as much as he does, I think he's shooting the low 60s.
Yeah, he's about 61%, or he was prior to Ohio State, which did not help his numbers any.
Ruth, go
Yeah,
ahead.
the free throw shooting though, you mentioned earlier Iowa's, lost 4 of 5. The one game they won, the Penn State game, free throw shooting, it was why they almost lost that game as well, because they were what, 1 of 7 from the free throw line in the second half?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Missed all three of their front ends,
yeah.
all three in the second half.
Price is now 65% from the free throw line. That just cannot happen. Drew Thelwell, 66%. Cannot happen as a guard. Brock Harding is third on the team at 73%. The only two that are shooting above 80% are Peyton Sanford and Josh Dix. And when Josh couldn't get going, I love his patience. What I want him to do when he can't get going is be more aggressive, get to the foul line so you can get in some sort of rhythm. He didn't shoot a single free throw against Ohio State. The thing about this team is right now it's across the board. There is not one guy who is infallible on this team, and that's just generally that's how it is, right? But Peyton needs to be more consistent. Josh needs to be more consistent, though it's largely he's largely been the most consistent, right? Owen Freeman, you got to get back on D. You got to be able to recover. You got to make your free throws. Like it's everybody, anybody and everybody. And some of these guys can't make up for their deficiencies because they lack the physical tools. Like it's just weakness, 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 weakness. And what you see as an opposing team that's looking at the scouting report is expose, 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 expose. It's not that hard to beat this Iowa team.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'm good. You guys good?
Yeah.
I think
The,
we we've
one
vented
thing
enough
that
for
I'll
1 week.
add is the most dangerous thing about what you just said is they would agree. I think a lot of the guys on this team know that it's not that difficult to beat them, and that is dangerous territory. And with that, we can move on.
Maybe not on the record, but
Yeah,
off the record, I bet they would. Anyway,
yeah.
on to women's basketball, so Adam can contribute more so to the conversation. He was just sitting back
So,
and watching Ross and I just fume.
well, we can actually talk about a basketball team that's won a couple games
Yay!
lately as well.
Yeah, after losing five in a row. So yeah,
Well, right,
there's been no shortage of
right.
steam coming out of ears in terms of this program too. But no,
January was a rough month for
a
basketball in
rough
Iowa
month for
City.
bracketology. But no, they are at the very least back on their winning ways. Just beat Northwestern, who is still winless in the Big Ten. They were favored by about 2 dozen points. I saw it anywhere from 23.5 to 25.5. Only won by 5. They were losing for most of the first half. Northwestern was, shooting the lights out. After not shooting, 30% on three-pointers for the year, 9 for 15. And, that is, if they were shooting to their normal, pattern, that's about a 15-point difference. And so then, that's why this was a 5-point game, not a 20-point game. But regardless, you get Hannah Stuelke, 26 points in her first game back from that concussion that she suffered against Nebraska during that overtime period. And we heard from the coaches that she was seeing double at the free throw line after getting hit in the head. And that was kind of a clue that something was a little bit off there. But like Jan said after the game, when Hannah iced the game at the line, was 6 for 6 at the free throw line. She said, yeah, it's a little bit easier when you can only see one the hoops, right? Like, so they are at the very least happy that Hannah's back. They're able to make, they're able to joke about that, and you're starting to see a lot of that confidence return to this team after what is, a really tough 5-game stretch for so many of these players who have never really gone through a stretch like that. So yeah, it was a win. It was not a cover. But like Jan Jensen said after the game, she sees anybody in the Big Ten as a tough opponent, and Northwestern sort of proven this time and time again. Ross, did you get a chance to see the game? And what do you think about how Iowa handled such a hot shooting performance from a team like the Wildcats, who really, I guess, was not expected to show up like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was able to watch most of the second half, and it seemed like Iowa was able to keep them at arm's length for a good chunk of that half. Northwestern shooting cooled off a little bit, but I thought Iowa did a really good job of getting the ball to Stuelke. Fed her. She was really effective in that game last night, which was good to see coming off that concussion where she missed a couple games. We've seen a better Lucy Olson the last couple games, which was much needed. She was in such a shooting funk for during Iowa's losing streak, essentially, and she's kind of popped out. So that impressed me, and I thought one of the things that I noticed during the game was that unlike during the losing streak, when things would go bad, Iowa often wasn't able to find an answer. They couldn't get a stop or make a couple buckets to kind of rebuild that lead. And they were a lot better at doing that in the game last night. It did get a little hairy at the end when Northwestern's shooting touch returned, and all of a sudden they're just, making everything. It's like, wait, how is this a 3-point game? But yeah, they had enough, and the free throws, the free throw shooting was much better, which was been a big costly problem for them as well, especially in that losing streak where they were dropping a lot of close games where those free throws, the missed free throws really, really just stood out as a glaring reason for the losses. So yeah, I thought, you maybe want to see a more emphatic win over a team, where Northwestern is in the standings, but like you said, you kind of can't control if the team's going to have one of those red hot shooting nights sometimes. But I thought Iowa did a better job of handling that and withstanding that than they had earlier in the month for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned the free throws and Hannah Stuelke of all players icing the game at the free throw line and doing it with such self-confidence that like she's even holding her, release pose on the last free throw, which was, of course, splashdown, right? And I was sitting right next to Dallas Jones of Hawk Fanatic, and right before Hannah shot the first of the two free throws, he leans over and says, "Oh, I saw the look in her eyes. These are both water." And of course and again, like splashes them both. And that coming from somebody who has a career free throw shooting percentage of like 61%, I believe it is. She's got that percentage up to 70% on the year. And, here she is on the free throw line, game on the line, hits them both and is feeling herself for it too. Even after the game when I asked her about it, and she said a big part of it was that she spent her entire off season when she was recovering from the knee surgery, just working on the free throws, and just knowing that the team believes in her in that point, her teammates believe in her in that point. She says, yeah, there's no way that it's not going in. She gives a little eyebrow and a little shimmy, and gives a look to Eliot, who was sitting next to her. So that little, you can see that the confidence is back. You can see that this team is really starting to believe in itself as someone who can hang with pretty much anybody in the Big Ten. And you have to have that sort of self-confidence with a team like USC coming to town on Sunday, because that is going to be an insane task for this, especially for this team as it's built.
Yeah. Why don't you say a little bit more about the challenge that USC poses, I guess. That is going to be the biggest. Well, I mean, biggest for now. UCLA is coming into Carver a few weeks later, and they're currently leading the Big Ten. Are they still ranked number one in the country too?
Oh gosh, I mean,
Maybe
you're asking.
one or two.
You start to not care as much about the top 25 once Iowa's not in it.
Yeah, yeah. Either way, though.
Yeah.
I mean, USC is going to be just an exceptionally tough opponent, and it's just a massive game. It's the Caitlin Clark number retirement. Is it number retirement or jersey retirement?
Jersey retirement.
Jersey retirement ceremony, and a big recruiting weekend for the Iowa women as well.
Yeah, so in terms of the challenge that USC poses, first and foremost, you have to start with little known wing Juju Watkins, who's I believe 6'2", but is nominally a guard. But she is averaging 25 points per game. She's the heir apparent to everything that Caitlin Clark's been building, and is really, if she stays in college for 4 years, she will have a legit shot to take a run at Caitlin Clark's career scoring record. Like, she is the real deal Holyfield as scorers go. And if there is one advantage that Caitlin has over Juju in terms of like national fame, like one overarching genetic undeniable advantage that Caitlin has via birth, I think undeniably it's the fact that Caitlin is older, right? Like, if Juju were the one who were 2 or 3 classes ahead of Caitlin, then it would be Watkins leading this grand women's basketball revolution, because she's that skilled, she's that good. I mean, we're talking about somebody who's also averaging 7 rebounds a game, 4 assists a game, 2.5 steals a game, 2 blocks per game, and doing this shooting 46%, 36% from deep, can score on anybody, right? And so Iowa is going to have to figure out who they're going to have D up on her, like who draws that defensive assignment. But that's really sort of like trying to figure out which deer draws the semi on the defensive assignment on I-80. It's just like, we're really just picking a victim here. So it's going to be fascinating to see how Iowa tries on some level to defend that. And then you look at a post like Kiki Iriafen, and those Iowa State fans who saw her play and almost single-handedly beat them in the tournament for Stanford a year or two ago. They've got a little bit of Kiki PTSD, Kiki SD, whatever. Either way, Kiki also averages 18 points a game, is shooting over 50% from the field, can also shoot it from three. Is also averaging 8 rebounds a game. Oh, they're also getting 9 rebounds a game from Ryan Marshall, their center, right? Like they have size, they have depth, they have elite talent. Like Kiki can dunk, like straight up in a game, like that level of like just freakish athleticism. So Iowa does have its toughest challenge, up to this point of the season, like you mentioned, Ross. And, at this point, it's going to be fascinating to see how a student of the game like Jan Jensen and her staff puts together a plan to, at the very least, keep this game competitive into the second half, maybe even into the fourth quarter, and just get it to the point where hottest team wins. Eliot, it looked like you were about to say something and ask something.
If you had to guess, who guards Juju?
God, prayer. No. If
I would
if I
say
had to guess somebody, it would
you.
either be Sita Folter or Hannah Stuelke. And it's really going to come down to the personnel that USC has on the floor alongside of Watkins and, who Iowa has to, put in for defensive purposes. But if it's not a Folter, if a Folter can't keep Watkins from getting her shot up, and with a 3 or 4 inch height deficit, it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case. If uh, Stuelke can't keep herself out of foul trouble, right? Because you need her to stay on the court. At the very least, Jan doesn't play the 2 foul jail that Fran does, but she is still somebody that you need on the court as much as possible. And if you're trying to even slow down Juju with your best scoring and it like one of your few scoring threats in the post, that is not really setting Stuelke up for success either. So, there might be more Ava Hayden minutes, right? There might be more Tegan Mullaney minutes. It's probably going to be all hands on deck and all fouls on deck as much as anything. But it's, USC's number 4 for a reason. Just like UCLA, Ross, to actually answer your question, is still number 1, and they're both still undefeated in the Big Ten at 8-0 for a reason. So it's going to be the toughest test that Iowa's had, but also as you mentioned, the biggest recruiting weekend as well. So all eyes will be on Iowa City on Sunday.
In terms of game plan, obviously hope is not a strategy, but in terms of, winning this game, it's kind of Iowa needs to hope that their threes are falling and USC's aren't. Like that's kind of one of the biggest takeaways I have from, just projecting this game, it seems like I'm not sure how Iowa wins that game without a really strong 3-point shooting performance from themselves, from Taylor McCabe and Eliot Guyton and Sita Folter and everybody basically.
Yeah, and frankly, they're due for one of those, especially against a tough opponent, because it seems like they have been, sort of falling victim to that from their opponents on uh, sort of an outsized basis this year, up to and including just last night against Northwestern when the Wildcats again hit 9 for 15, which is about 3 times as often as they usually hit them, right? So, um, some of it's bad luck. Iowa was not playing bad defense, although some of their perimeter closeouts last night were not that good. Again, this is a team where often you're happy with some of those players that are taking those shots, right? Um, but it is a situation where Iowa will need to be the better team from the perimeter to win this game because USC is just so talented, so deep, so large, especially on the interior, and has so many different scoring weapons that it I always try to say luck is not a dirty word, especially in basketball. And Iowa is just kind of have to gonna be a little bit lucky in this one, just sort of the same way that LSU was lucky to, shoot the lights out against Iowa in the national championship 2 seasons ago, right? Like it doesn't make it more or less valid. It's just sort of the way games shake out sometimes. And Iowa sort of needs to be on the right side of that bell curve, the end of that bell curve, if they want a shot. And, that's again why USC is 18-1 and Iowa is not.
You mentioned the big recruiting weekend ahead, Adam. How much did you want to hit on that quick before we get
Yeah,
out of here?
yeah, absolutely. So the Addie Deal and Journey Houston are both signed members of the 2025 class, and they were both in town for the last big Iowa recruiting weekend, which was before the regular season, which is when they got Layla Hayes, the center out of Alaska, who's the last member of the 2025 class. This is going to be one of the biggest recruiting weekends of Iowa basketball history, men's or women's, because the list of recruits is loaded. We're talking about 5 different top 20 recruits outside of Deal in Houston, right? Like not even the commits. Kate Harpring is the biggest one, number 2 in ESPN's rankings for 2026. And not only is she elite offensively, but she is a dog defensively. As in like put her on anybody's best player. And she'll not only give them 30 on offense, but she'll try to shut them down. Like it's like watching Gary Payton Sr. play again. She's that level of intense. Maybe not as much of a talker, but somebody who was raised by Matt Harpering, former Georgia Tech legend. I want to say like a 10, 12 NBA or 10 or 12 year NBA vet. Magic quite a bit. Like competitive basketball and like bringing it every single game is something that is, true to her, not new to her. And something that certainly a coach like Jan Jensen is going to be thrilled for. You've also got Jenica Lewis, who is a top 15 recruit in the 2026 class out of Johnston. She's part of All Iowa Attack, as is Addison Bjorn, who's a wing from that class. And again, top 20, like all of them are. Both play these very, very well-rounded, versatile, put the ball in their hands if you want, play them at basically whatever position you want. Like that is that same level of versatility that you see out of Caitlin Clark, out of Kylie Feuerbach, out of Hannah Stuelke, because those are all Iowa Attack um, products. And so like a Leah Crump, who is the number 5 overall member of the class, played for All Iowa Tech, committed to Texas instead of Iowa, and Iowa desperately wanted Crump. But Lewis looked comparable to Crump, even a year younger, but like had that same floor general, sort of feel to her, had the same ability to break anybody's press. And they were going up against some elite competition when I watched them in Des Moines. So, she's somebody that you can put on the court to play the 1, the 2, the 3, probably even the 4 with size like hers. And so when you start adding her to lineups that have like Taylor Stremlow, that have Addie Deal, right? That have Kate Harpring, that have Aaliyah Guyton. All of a sudden, you start to see all these different ways that you can use a deep and dangerous backcourt, and you see how they start to show up and start to gel. Um, They've also got Finley Chastain, who's a 2027 guard, just a lights out shooter. Again, top 20 for that class, and somebody that they've been working on that relationship for a while. They had her in last summer, but this is going to be her first game, just like it's going to be Kate Harpering's first game at Carver Hawkeye Arena. And good Lord, they're going to be there when Caitlin Clark's there. And then last member of that recruiting weekend is Jeliana Guy from Bettendorf, and originally from Clinton too, but 2028 is probably going to be a top 5 member of the class once those rankings start to come out, once, she starts to age up. But tremendous ball handler, tremendous shooter, tremendous work ethic. Comes from a family that I know a lot of coaches are a really, really big fan of Jordan Guy, and sort of keeping her in that whole operation on the forward path. So yeah, there's a ton of mutual respect there, and yeah, this is going to be sort of the ultimate, or at the very least, the first test of the ultimate recruiting weapon, which is Caitlin Clark is an alum of your program, right? Like, and so once she puts on that recruiting full court press, how effective is it going to be? Because we've never really seen a trump card like this in like what, 20, 30 years outside of, something like Tennessee or UConn. And even that is just sort of like none of them are singular in the way that Caitlin Clark is, right? Like those are decades long legacies. Here's Caitlin in the flesh saying, look at how far my dreams went in Iowa City. Why would you not want that for yourself too, right? So it's going to be fascinating to see how effective that is. Eliot, you had something burning your finger there real quick when I was talking about, the ace up your sleeve in recruiting.
You were saying nobody's had a recruiting ticket like this in, and I almost said ever. I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a big weekend. It's just really smart by the staff to make it all happen on this specific weekend. Even though you're facing one of the top teams in the country, it's going to be a packed house. This ceremony is going to keep everybody around, no matter how much it gets out of hand or anything like that. So big weekend ahead for Iowa women's basketball there in Carver Hawkeye. Did Braden sign up to go to that, by the way, Adam?
I believe so.
Oh,
Yeah.
damn. Okay. I was gonna see if I could fill in. Hope he gets sick. Just kidding. I did. Stay healthy, Braden. We'll obviously have full coverage of that from Adam and Braden Roberts there at Carver Hawkeye. And of course, our national team at Yahoo Sports and Rivals texted us today, and they are very excited to get some content from you guys at the event. So, like we said, we will have coverage of that, but also big time guest coming up that we are recording on Friday. Very excited about that. Pod will be released probably Sunday, maybe Monday instead, considering that game happening there on Sunday. But yeah, as always, feel free to join us, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. We'd love to have you. Get access to all of our premium content, be part of the conversation on the premium boards as well. We appreciate you tuning into this episode of HawkCast. Do not forget, make sure to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know how you're feeling about men's basketball. Again, this is always a safe space. What are you thinking about those Iowa football recruits? And then, of course, that retirement ceremony coming up for Caitlin and her jersey. All those recruits coming to Carver Hawkeye as well. Leave that rate and review. And, of course, hit a subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, so you don't miss an episode there. And for now, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Ross Binder and Adam Jacoby. We will see you next time.